Damon and Viserys Targaryen's brotherly relationship is central to House of the Dragon and the Dance of the Dragons, but what's the history there? Who were their parents? Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to In Deep Geek. On this channel we cover A Song of Ice and Fire, The Lord of the Rings, and much more. Welcome. This video was produced in collaboration with the wonderful History of Westeros. Please check out their podcast and channel. There's a link in the description. And as usual, here's your spoiler warning for House of the Dragon. Proceed with caution. Here be dragons. Viserys and Daemon Targaryen's relationship is complex. There is clearly love there, great love, but also anger and frustration at each other's faults. By the time we meet them in House of the Dragon, they are both grown men. When Aemma, Viserys' wife, died, Viserys was 28 and Daemon 24. But what's the history there? Well, let's start with their grandparents, old King Charis and good Queen Alyssa. Those two reigned for decades and had 13 children, 6 boys and 7 girls. With so many of each and, well, you know how Targaryens are, you might guess that several pairings of prince and princess were made. But as events played out, Viserys and Daemon's parents, Baelon and Alyssa, were the only 2 of the 13 to marry within the group. You would also probably guess that out of the 13 there'd be a good number of dragon riders, but that wouldn't be true either. Only 3 were, but 2 of those 3 were Baelon and Alyssa. So on the face of it, they were the most Targaryen-y of the 13 Targaryen children of the most beloved and long-reigning Targaryen ruler of them all. Baelon and Alyssa were born consecutively. Baelon came first in the year 57. His birth came so close to the Citadel's reckoning of spring that his nickname was based on it, the Spring Prince. He was not the firstborn, though. He was preceded by a brother Aegon, who tragically died at just 3 days, then a sister named Daenerys, and a brother named Aemon. In a prelude to the succession issues we see before and during the Dance of the Dragons, King Charis wanted Aemon to be the heir, while Queen Alyssa favoured the firstborn Daenerys. Charis claimed it wasn't a problem, since the 2 were to be married anyway. Sadly, Daenerys died at 7 of the mysterious disease called the Shivers when Aemon was 5 and Baelon 3. I had a guest appearance on History of Westeros opposite Joe Magician, where we discussed the Shivers and the Winter Fever, which claimed their sister Gale much later. If you fancy going down that particular wormhole, there's a link in the description. Later that same year, Princess Alyssa, presumably named after her mother Alyssa, was born. As they all grew up, Baelon very much admired and looked up to his big brother Aemon, heir to the throne and Prince of Dragonstone, and got along very well with his sister Alyssa, who in turn looked up to him. For a time, Charis thought Alyssa might take Daenerys' place and marry Prince Aemon in her stead, and thus become queen one day. But Queen Alyssa had noticed the bond between Alyssa and Baelon, and was adamant that they would marry when old enough. Both Alyssa and Baelon grew into quite strong characters. In fact, there was some small worry at first that Prince Baelon was mad. The first time the boy visited the Dragon Pit, he hit Balerion the Black Dread on the snout. We see a bit of where Daemon gets it from, perhaps. But in a triumph of message management, the nickname that flowed from this was not the Mad Prince or something like that, but Baelon the Brave, to go along with the Spring Prince. Not even 10 years old, and he had 2 nicknames already. Alyssa, like her mother, looked a bit less like most Targaryens. She didn't have the silvery hair so common to Valyrians, and her eyes were mismatched, one purple, one green. When she was 6, she broke her nose and it healed crookedly, all in all a strong look. She dressed like a boy and preferred the company of boys, especially her brother. By the time Alyssa was 12 and Baelon 16, they were inseparable, and a few years later, in the year 75 AC, they married. Baelon had already claimed Vhagar as his dragon, and then Alyssa became the first rider of Melies, the Red Queen. That's the dragon we later see Rhaenys riding in House of the Dragon. They both loved to fly and be close to one another. The prince and princess were said to have spent every hour either on their dragons or in their bedroom. At which point, we have to say that, at first glance, Daemon seems to have inherited a lot more from them both than the conflict avoid of Viserys. Indeed, the comparisons between Baelon and his son Daemon are strong. Some called him mad, others loved him. He wielded the sword Dark Sister. He loved riding his dragon. He had lusty appetites, adored his older brother, loved a tourney, and was knighted at an early age. A description that would work for both father and son. Indeed, in episode 4 of House of the Dragon, Viserys jokes several times with Daemon that their mother liked him best. He may have been flattering his brother, but it does seem that both Mother Alyssa and Father Baelon had more in common with Daemon. But as far as we can tell, this was a happy family unit, the happy couple and their 2 young sons. But tragically, Alyssa died while both her sons were still young, 6 months after her 3rd son died in the cradle. She was only 24. Viserys was 7, and Daemon just 3. Had Daemon been only a little younger, he might not remember her at all. Baelon, the boy's father, never remarried, nor had any further children, and for the next 8 years he seems to have focused on being a single Targaryen parent, a period of time which included seeing his sons acquire dragons. Viserys claimed the legendary Balerion the Black Dread, though Balerion was rather old and sleepy by then, and died less than a year later. Viserys never took to flying, and never took another dragon. We're left to wonder whether he deliberately chose a dragon that didn't want to fly much, and would probably die soon anyway. It's possible. Daemon claimed Caraxes, previously bonded with Aemon, Baelon's beloved older brother, who had tragically died a bit earlier. And Baelon also saw to it that his son and heir married well. Viserys married Aemma Arryn. The Arryns are obviously an important family in Westeros, but also Aemma was Baelon and Alyssa's niece, the daughter of Daela Targaryen, 8th-born child of Jaehaerys and Alicent, so already family. Yes, this family tree is particularly large and interconnected, almost circular in places. The extremely criss-cross blood pattern that comes along during the intro to House of the Dragon represents the line of Jaehaerys and Alysanne. Even representing it visually is tricky. Daemon, as we know, was married off to Rhea Royce, another noble family from the Vale, but unlike Viserys, who put effort into his marriage, Daemon didn't. Perhaps this is partly a classic case of an older brother taking life and responsibilities seriously, and a younger brother just enjoying the privileges it brings. Countless generations of royal families have seen that dynamic playing out. And responsibilities were starting to mount for Viserys. I mentioned that Aemon, their father's older brother, had died. This meant that Baelon was heir. That brought with it the title of Prince of Dragonstone, and in the year 100, Hand of the King, too, and de facto acting king, as the old king was really getting quite, well, old. The boys had lost their mother at an early age, and now, as they entered adulthood, their father was often absent and busy, and Viserys was facing up to the prospect that he might be king someday, a calling he had never expected growing up. It's easy to see in these circumstances how Viserys and Daemon grew such a strong bond, the shared early trauma of their mother's death, life in the spotlight as they grew, and also how Viserys could have felt such a weight of responsibility growing, whereas Daemon didn't. He was the oldest child when one parent dies, a dragon he had bonded to dying while he was still young, the only time in Targaryen history we ever hear of that happening, incidentally. Marriage and parenthood at a relatively young age, then the mantle of heir to the throne thrust upon him. At some point, presumably, his father also told him about that prophecy and how very, very important it was for Targaryens to stay in power. Despite the privilege, it can't have been an easy start to life for Viserys. But at least he thought he would have a long time to get used to the idea of being heir and of being king one day. Of course, the gods and George R. R. Martin don't like things to be so simple, and Baelon, Viserys and Daemon's father, died within a year of being made Hand of the King. It was completely unexpected. While on a hunting trip, he complained of a stitch in his side, which quickly worsened, and 5 days later, he was gone. Daemon was 20, Viserys 24. Baelon himself had been 43. Given his health and the general resistance of Targaryens to diseases, it's possible that there was foul play. On the TV show, Viserys even hints to Otto Hightower that he thinks he might have been responsible, but in truth there's no real evidence of that. Otto did benefit by becoming Hand of the King in Baelon's place, but without any evidence, we probably have to mark this down as just another tragic Targaryen death, a burst appendix perhaps. Regardless, it was a tragedy for the realm as well as the family, and directly led to the events leading up to the Dance of the Dragons. The Great Council of 101 basically decided that the son of the Old King's second heir, that's Viserys, should inherit, rather than the daughter or grandson of his first heir, that's Rhaenys and Laenor, because she was a woman. Baelon's death clearly impacted on both of his sons. Viserys named his short-lived son that we saw in episode 1 of House of the Dragon Prince Baelon, after his father, and when Damon later has children, he names his firstborn daughter Baelor, the female version of Baelon. There is one other detail, though, that sums up Viserys and Daemon's relationship. Just after their father had died and they were both finally technically free to do as they wish, there came that Great Council of 101 AC. Daemon loved his older brother and threw himself completely in support of his claim. Then came a rumour that Corlys Velaryon was preparing an army and navy to support the claim of Laenor, his son, or on the show Rhaenys, his wife. Viserys seems to have impassively just kept doing his duty, staying at Harrenhal, waiting for the vote and seemingly willing to accept the judgment of the collective will. Daemon, on the other hand, went and raised an army himself of sellswords and hedge knights. Viserys doing his duty and not upsetting people, Daemon willing to throw the continent into civil war to support his brother. Viserys and Daemon had a brotherly bond that could not be broken despite their differing characters. Viserys' conflict avoidance so often held back Daemon's fire and fury, and Daemon's chaotic streaks so often embarrassed and infuriated Viserys, but they remained close, however far apart they were, because of that bond forged in childhood. The question now is, what will it do to Daemon to lose his brother, the sole constant presence in his life? The link to his happy early childhood and his restraining anchor. What will Daemon be capable of now Viserys is not there to hold him back? If you'd like to see more A Song of Ice and Fire videos, please click on the link appearing now on the left of your screen. Or to support this channel, thank you. There's a link to my Patreon page on the right of your screen. That's all for this time. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon.